This is Talking Heads, and it's that time of the year again. Every April, I get my blank tax return reminder from the Income Tax Division, and every year I decide that I'm going to do it straight away in April rather than prevaricate all summer and put the job off. Then usually it's the last weekend of September before I actually get my accounts pile of paperwork out and do the online return. Being self-employed, it takes me around 4 hours, that's all, 3 or 4 hours, but I expect most people will be able to do theirs in just a few minutes because their accounts or their annual reckoning is a lot simpler. The deadline for year-ending April 2018 returns is before midnight this Saturday. But don't panic if you've still not filed. Gerard Higgins from the tax office is here with me to offer help and advice. Gerard, it's always good to see you. We've been doing this for a while now, haven't we?
Yes. Actually, it started when we first introduced the penalty regime for income tax back in, I think it was 2006.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it on a regular annual basis since we've introduced the online service for submitting tax returns.
That was the big one, and that's a good few years ago now as well, isn't it?
Yes, it's 2010-11 that we actually introduced that, and we've seen a massive surge in use of it. And in fact, this year I can tell you that we've seen our biggest year-on-year increase.
Really?
Yes.
Of people deciding to do it online?
Yes, I think it's 2 years since I've been up here talking to you, and at that time we were just over the 30% mark in terms of returns being submitted, and now we're at nearly 44%. As of this morning, we had nearly 18,700 returns submitted online out of a total of nearly 43,000.
Wow.
So we're not that far off now, really, that magical 50% mark, and I'd like to think maybe we could hit it this time next year.
And people will be listening to this and saying, yeah, but I haven't got a computer, I don't do online. I mean, you know, for the foreseeable future there will always be an option to do a paper return, won't there?
Oh yes, and that's important that we retain that ability. There are people who, it's like you say, they're not interested in social media, the internet, they haven't got a computer or a laptop, and they're perfectly fine to make their return online, on paper too, rather than online. But obviously we're particularly wanting to encourage younger people who are more media savvy, social media savvy, more IT literate, to obviously file online. And like I say, we're seeing that increase. We've had nearly 2,600 returns in as of the same date last year. We've had 2,600 more as of the 3rd of October.
And it makes it easier for your people to process, I'm guessing, rather than getting bits of paper.
Indeed it does. The Income Tax Division has lots of responsibilities, including in the international tax sphere, where we have to put resources to that. There's a lot of people working very hard in that area as well. So therefore, we do have a limit on resources that we have available to us. So obviously, we try and streamline as much as we possibly can. But there's cost savings attached both to the individual and to government in that respect, in that we're not posting returns out to your assessments. You can file online at any time of day or night that suits you.
Yes.
You can view your assessment there. You can pay your tax online, and in fact you can receive any overpayment that you might be due directly into your bank account.
Well, I submitted mine on Sunday because I'd put it off as ever. This next April, I'm going to do it in April, but, you know, as ever, I was on the last minute this time. And I submitted it at, 6 o'clock on Sunday night and got an acknowledgement fairly quickly to say, we've got it, thank you. And the other thing that people aren't maybe aware of is that when you do an online return, you can start it in April and not finish it until October, because it sort of saves, doesn't it?
Yes,
so you can fill in one section.
You can go in there, you can complete any sections that you have the information available for. But what I would stress there is that in respect of any employment details, if someone's in receipt of an occupational pension or they're receiving state benefits such as retirement pension or child benefit, if you go in towards the end of April or May or June and complete, say, then, the information's already there for you. It's pre-filled. You're not having to go around and look for example, copies of Tax Form 14s where you've got that data, or you're having to look at your final pay slip for March. So the information's already there for you.
It is, in a lot of cases.
So in the vast majority of people who maybe only have employment, they may have a little bit of bank interest, or they're paying mortgage or loan interest, it's fairly straightforward.
I would think for most
online.
people it's just a few minutes every year to just fill it in.
Yes, and like I say, they can do it at any time of day or night. And It saves them having to think about posting it or coming into the division at last minute. You know, we're seeing a lot of people now coming into our counter area last minute. They've lost that tax return.
Yeah.
Even if someone submitted a paper return already for this year, no problem in them going and actually registering and preparing themselves for online for next year, so that they're into next year's cycle and able to deal with us online.
You mentioned earlier on about the fact that that you now are able to apply costs to people. You can fine people for filing late these days.
Yes.
Do you do that? Is that something that you use a lot? Do a lot of people end up getting fines?
When we first introduced the penalty regime, there was about 6,000 people who were incurring a penalty.
Wow.
That's down to about 3,500 now. So we've seen a significant fall over the last decade in that respect. But obviously, what is our job is we want to encourage people to submit their return and not incur that penalty, because if they haven't submitted by the 6th of October, there's a penalty of £100, and if they still haven't submitted by the following April, there's a further £200 penalties.
And I'm guessing that that's a fairly automated thing, is it? So
Indeed
if,
it is, yes.
if the system says you've not filed, then you're liable and that's the end of it?
Indeed, yes.
Okay. Do you offer help to people? I'm fairly sure we've talked about it in the past. And in the run-up now, I mean, we've got until Saturday.
Yes.
I'm guessing that you would rather that the majority of people don't wait until a minute to midnight before filing their online returns.
Indeed, Stu.
So, I mean, if people are getting a bit stuck with it or whatever, you usually offer a bit of help, I think, in the run-up to the deadline,
And we are once again this year. Firstly, our counters are open from 9:15 to 5 p.m. Today and tomorrow to 4:30 on Friday. Someone can come in. We will actually help them if they're completing a paper return, or if they want to register and go online, we will help them there and then. They can telephone 685 400 using option 2 anytime during the day, and we will take them through the enrolment process so that they could, for example, if they rang this afternoon, they could go home tonight and complete online. And then we are opening out of hours on Thursday night until 8 p.m, Friday night until 8 p.m, and between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Saturday as well.
Right.
So that we'll have a dedicated phone line and officers available to assist people in completion of their return.
What sort of help can you give people? Because I'm guessing, and I've heard from other people, that the tax office can't give specific advice on what's allowable and what's not or whatever. You know, they'll say you need to talk to an accountant about that. We can't give you that kind of advice. What sort of advice can you give people?
Well, first and foremost, we can help them. For example, if they want to enrol and submit their tax return online, we can obviously take them through that. If they've got any queries, they might just have a query of, should I put this on my return? Shouldn't I put something on my return? We'll try and assist them there and then. But if in doubt, we'd probably say to them, put in the details to us and we can resolve any subsequent queries afterwards.
And I think in previous years, there's also been the opportunity to say, file your return, and if you're short of maybe an interest certificate or something like that, just put on the return that you're going to forward that as soon as you can get hold of it, and we're not going to fine you for being late.
Make a clear note if there's something that you can't forward to us, or if you have got a figure but haven't got necessarily verification of it, it doesn't matter so much, just put that figure down for the time being.
I've always found that the tax office in the Isle of Man aims to be helpful. I've had various interactions with them over the years that I've been here, and they've all been pretty positive, whereas in the UK, HMRC, I mean, really, it's very hard work at times. Is that something that you actually aim for? Is it just that the Isle of Man is a nicer place?
Well, I think it's very important, not only from my perspective, from the assessor all the way down through our division to the hard-working staff on our counters and telephones. It's important that we deliver a high-quality customer service and give the support that everyone deserves.
Because at the end of the day, all that you want is for people to pay the amount of tax that they ought to be paying.
Yes, paying the right amount of tax at the right time.
Yeah.
And I would just use that opportunity to turn around and say those people who for example, will have a bill that's due and payable in January 2019. If they're not online, go and register online. And then once it comes to that Christmas New Year period, instead of having to worry about ringing up to make a payment or sending a cheque in the post, they can obviously just go and do that online.
Yeah. Let's have a look at some comments. How do you find out more information? I'm married. Me and the wife just do our own tax forms, but it'd be better off just doing one between us. If it depends on what we earn, what are the figures before you start paying tax, etc. Also, being self-employed, what things can you claim for, like business insurance? That from Matty.
Well, obviously, I don't want to go into anybody's own personal circumstances, but I'm quite happy if some good questions there, several questions there from Matty. If he would like to give me a ring this afternoon, if I'm not available, just leave a message on my answer phone and I'll get back to him. And my number, Matty, is 685-324.
685-324, straight through to Gerard. Good. Is it possible to ask here why the tax office gives tax relief on a personal pension contribution at the end of the year? Across, you get tax relief when you pay it, making a massive difference as you get the benefit of compound interest.
Well,
it's a technical question.
The tax relief is given both on superannuation contributions and personal pension premiums. Now, depending on a person's circumstances, that might be available throughout the year in their tax code. It depends again. We're going back to what the person's personal circumstances are.
Okay. My tax form is now safely in the post. All my fees are paid. What happens if I've not filled it in correctly? Will I get a fine? Also, can you guys confirm whether our hard-earned taxes are going to fund the civil service pension black hole? That's a political question.
Obviously, I won't comment on the second one, but on the first one there, the important thing is getting the tax return into us. If there's any queries, our officers will take it up subsequently with that individual or their appointed agent.
So you've got the form in, and as far as the law is, as far as the rules are concerned, you've done your bit.
Yes, as long as it's signed, etc., and somebody hasn't put some sort of funny pictures all over it, and they've filled it into a reasonable extent.
Okay. What's this? I'd rather buy gold and bury it for further use. Gold is non-tax deductible, says John. John, you need to be careful. What else? Can you ask the taxman his opinion on MHK and MLC expense payments? No, I can't, because I can't ask him that because I know he can't answer it. He's a civil servant, and that's a political question. Stu was hanging on waiting for the name of the track before the last endless stream of adverts, but it didn't come. What was it, please? I don't know. What was it? It was Ed Sheeran, Castle on the Hill, Wendy. I'm self-employed and useless filling things online. I take my form into the office and I find the counter staff to be really helpful, says Graham.
Well, there again, we have an example of someone that they're not wishing to use online. Absolutely fine. But I'm pleased to hear for those comments that our staff are helpful and assisting that individual.
All right. G sent me a question for the taxman about how much do millionaires have to get to only pay the tax cap. Again, that's a political question. Gerard is in charge of getting the money in. How it's spent is and what is taxed is not his job. I remember my older sister having a talk by somebody from the tax office at school about tax return forms, what to do when getting your first job, etc. I'm off school ill. Will the tax people be coming round school again, please? I think it's a good idea, says Charlotte. Do you go into schools?
That's a very good comment. We had been doing up to recently, but I'll obviously take that comment back, and we'll see what we can do about that, because obviously our younger generation, they need support in respect of tax, national insurance, all of those things that take them on the path of life. We need to try and help.
I think it's brilliant that sort of stuff's taught. I never had an idea.
Neither did I.
Well, I started work at 16, didn't have a clue about national insurance or tax or anything like that. I mean, my dad always used to moan about the tax, but I didn't know what it actually meant or how it worked. This from Tina. Please, can you confirm why, when more people are filing the tax return online, is it taking longer to be received back? What's the normal timescale? Do you get any penalties if you are late returning it to the people paying your wages? Says Tina.
Well, what I would say there is that we have a turnaround time of 4 months. Now, before everybody turns around and goes, that's an awful long time, it's considerably shorter in most cases. Yeah. Now, I can't comment on individual cases. We may have to raise particular queries. Somebody might have added comments to their online return, which one of our officers has to take up. But if you bear in mind that over the next 24, 48 hours, we are likely online or by way of paper to receive between 10 and 11,000 more returns. They have to be processed. So at this time of year, that period will lengthen out
Sure.
for dealing with your return when you submit it. But if it's earlier in the year and maybe it's a little bit quieter, we'll have a quicker turnaround time.
The other benefit maybe of the online return is that, and I don't know if it's just self-employed people like me or if everybody gets it, I presume everybody gets it, in that it gives you a computation. So when you actually submit the return, it tells you how much tax you owe.
Yes, you mentioned the instant notification that you received, that you submitted it for peace of mind.
Yeah.
You also have that computation that gives you a provisional idea of whether you owe us any tax or we are due to repay you anything.
Which is good news if you. I always owe tax, so it gives you 3 months or whatever to put some money aside and pay your bill. So
indeed, it does. The earlier that you get it in, the earlier that you know what that amount might be, and you can plan for payment in January 2019.
Lot to be said for that, because it can be a big chunk of money to have to find all of a sudden. So the more notice you've got, the more time you've got to put money aside, the better.
Yes, so it's important really as soon as you can do, when you receive your tax return in April, to try and get it into us as quick as you possibly can.
I'll try. I will, honestly.
Have to next year, Stu.
What dates does the tax year run from and to, please? Is it April the 6th to
It's
April
the 6th of April to the following 5th of April.
Right, okay. I popped into the tax office yesterday to submit my return and found the help given very helpful and courteous. Very impressed, says Roger. Good.
Thank you for those comments, Roger.
There you go. Good. So you've got helplines on 685 400 Thursday, Friday and Saturday.
Thursday to 8 p.m, Friday to 8 p.m, and on Saturday between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Okay. Final comment then. Stu, can you pass on to Gerard that having to request assistance from the tax office last year, the lads I dealt with were marvellous. Service was one-to-one. This, as you say, just wouldn't be possible in the adjacent aisle. That from Ali. So,
yeah, and I would just add to that if I could do, Stu.
Yeah.
It's nice to receive comments like that I can take back to our hard-working officers in the division.
Good. Well, on that positive note, we'll end it for another year. But Gerard Higgins, thanks very much for coming in, and hope you're not too overworked over the next few weeks.
Thank you for your time, Stu.